Right, so what have we been up to then? Well, as you can see, this is going to be another Enterprise D. It's the Don Shoko 1000 scale kit, so it'll be about 2 feet long when it's finished. It's quite a rare kit, very hard to get hold of, so I was lucky to get this one. And it's going to be for a special client. This is for Terry Matalas, the showrunner of Picard Season 3. A few people online had recommended me to him to build him a D. He put a message out on some of the Facebook groups that I'm part of, asking if anyone could recommend someone to build a D for him, and a number of people recommended me. So Terry reached out, and very happy to be doing it for him. So as you can see, I've just sort of started on the armature work and like the violence being done to the kit, so I'll move on to the armature in a minute. But as for the specs of this, the general specs, Terry wants this to be as she appeared in the final 2 episode finale of Picard Season 3. So all the exposed paneling, the damaged saucer, all the scorch marks, the Syracuse graphics on the secondary hull, full lights, the whole shebang. So really going to go to town on this one. Now, obviously, I'm based in the UK. Terry's over in LA, so this needs to, one, survive a transatlantic trip when it's done, and two, I want it to hold together really well for years to come. Don't want this thing to start falling apart, obviously. That's never good. And this kit needs quite a lot of help to do that, particularly this joint back here, the pylon wing, the nacelle pylon wing. The way that the kit was broken down, it makes that quite a critical joint, and it's quite prone to failure from what I can tell. So not taking any chances there in terms of structure and strength, but I'll move on to that in a minute. Now, most people go with brass for armatures of large scale models. I'm not going with brass. I'm going with aluminium. There's a couple of reasons for that. So let's get all of the bodywork off of the armature and let's see what I'm doing there, and I'll discuss my thoughts on that. Now, as I said a moment ago, most people tend to favour using brass for this sort of thing. And I use brass, certainly in smaller scale models, but for projects this size, my preference is to use aluminium. Two main reasons for that. One, I've got a lot of it, and two, when you want to build structures that really need to hold together over a longer period of time, aluminium is preferable, for me at least, over brass, because I find it's easier to work with, it's easier to machine. But the major reason that I think is the main advantage for using aluminium over brass is that with brass you can't really use mechanical fasteners like these countersunk machine screws. You tend to solder those joints together, which is fine. That is absolutely a valid way to go. But for this sort of thing, I prefer mechanical joints over soldered ones. There's absolutely no failure likely to happen with these mechanical fasteners. There's no risk whatsoever of a joint being slightly weak where I haven't quite soldered it, and it's for me it's the way to go over brass. Obviously your mileage may vary. Now, as you can see, there's one core block that everything else is built out from. This block has been bored out to the same diameter of the main post, all the way through the block until about the last 5mm, where I step down the bore, so it's under the diameter of this post, so the post can't actually penetrate fully all the way through the block. It's being seated up through into there, and it sits down onto that post really nice and neat, and you can still pass your wires through that hole down through the post and into the base. So this armature is still being worked on at the moment. This is like the bare bones. There may be some more additions being done to it, so I haven't really fully locked everything up yet. Some of the major load bearing points will be slightly reinforced, probably, although it is extremely strong as it stands. This is 3mm thick aluminium, and it's heavy duty stuff. It's it's not cheap aluminium, because aluminium's on a sliding scale. Like the quality, as with everything else, you can get some cheap aluminium and you can get some good stuff. This is the good stuff, nice and strong and easy to machine, and it looks nice when you brush it over with a bit of Scotch-Brite as well. So it's got that brushed aluminium look, funnily enough. So yeah, it's all holding together extremely strongly. I'll just take off the post so you can see At the moment it's temporarily fixed to this bottom keel plate with some machine screws here and here. Eventually these will be added to. I may add some further screws into the block, and at the moment they're not sitting into the model. You can see them, they're sort of protruding out on the surface. Eventually they'll be countersunk, buried inside the resin, and then completely covered over, and you'll never know they're there. Pretty much how this one is at the back. You see the way it's countersunk, the head of the screw is countersunk, and it goes all the way through the resin. Now Don was good enough to cast these parts extremely thick, so it allows me to do that sort of thing. And it also allows me to do things like add this T-piece at the back. Now this rear joint for the pylon wings is pretty critical. It's going to hold a lot of weight because those nacelles are going to be fairly heavy when they're finished, and I'm not going to take any chances. You can add rods and stitch the joint together, and I did consider doing that, but in the end I thought, you know, I don't want to have any risk of this back wing bending down over time in any way, shape or form, so I'm just going to put this spar that goes and spans across both joints, and that way the joint will not move at all over the years to come. Now what it does mean is where I've had to machine clearance for this T-piece, it's made this part of the part, it's made this area of the part extremely thin in places, and obviously extremely weak. So now that doesn't matter at this point because it's not offering any structure whatsoever. In fact, you can see where I've blown through it with the milling bit there. That's not a biggie, I'll fill that in and you'll never know that was there. So yeah, as I was saying, this isn't a load bearing structure anymore. This aluminium piece, this is merely the skin on the outside of it. So it's not providing any support or structure whatsoever. So it doesn't matter that that's thin. It will do the job really well, I'm absolutely sure. So right, so this is the pylon, and you can see it's got a corresponding machine recess for that T-piece, and I'm going to leave the brass rod that was cast into the part because it's going to maintain that curvature really well. I won't use it for wires because it's just too thin. I'll have to machine out another channel to pass the wires up along this area here and then replace this detail. But you can see when it all sits together, it all lines up pretty nicely, and it will hold that joint absolutely rock solid for years to come. So that pretty much covers it for the secondary hull at this point at least. So let's have a look at those saucer laser cut parts and have a look ahead down the road at what's next. Right, let's have a quick word about this saucer armature then before we sort of wrap everything up. These have been cut by John Child at Captain's Dry Dock, so big thanks to John. Did great job and really fast turnaround. I sent him the drawings for these cuts and had the parts back within a week, so really happy about that. They're already getting loads of my fingerprints all over them because they're smudge magnets. But yeah, really nice clean cuts. Look at that, beautiful. Now I went with 5mm acrylic because using something like sheet aluminium, although it would have been my preference, one, it's difficult to cut that sort of thing unless you've got an industrial cutter, which I don't, and neither does John. I don't know anyone who does. And two, even at 3mm thick, the aluminium would have been heavier than this acrylic, and it would have cast shadows as well. So I would have had to have added some more lighting in spots, and it might have made lighting up the saucer rim windows even harder having a metal plate in there rather than this clear acrylic. So at least this way, any lighting on the inside of the saucer is going to be passing through the armature no problem at all. So and it's 5mm thick rather than 3mm or anything like that because it needs to be rigid enough to hold the saucer flat. When Don casts these parts, they're fiberglass, so they are very strong, but they are still quite flexible. They do have a little bit of a bow to them, so I want to make sure that they stay nice and flat and they don't warp over time, no pun intended. So this kills two birds with one stone. Now, one thing I will have to do with them being so thick is that obviously with a laser you can only cut directly down, you can't cut bevels. So I'll have to manually cut a bevel around the outside edge of both parts to make sure that the upper saucer can sit down and contact the bottom saucer properly, because as they are at the moment, with the thickness of the acrylic, there's an interference with the fit of the top to the bottom. So, but I knew that was going to be the case. It didn't, it's nothing that's caught me by surprise. It's just something, one of those things that you have to deal with, and it will be dealt with in due course. So, obviously, there will be a metal structure added to all of this as well, and obviously, then I can mount the lighting components to that as well. And that about covers it for the saucer, I think. So, yeah, let's move on. Now, before I go, I thought it'd be quite fun just to show a quick size comparison between some saucer parts. Obviously, that's the 1400 scale AMT saucer there, and you can see Don's 1000 scale underneath it. And as we pull back, you can see how much bigger the 4-foot filming model was. That's a cast of the 4-foot filming model. It's not a resin 3D printed or a fan made thing. That's a cast of the actual 4-foot model saucer. So you can see just how much bigger it really was. The thing is absolutely huge, and it's the smaller one of the two main filming models, because the 6-footer was 30% larger than that again. So it's absolutely enormous. Yeah, so anyway, that's enough from me. Thanks for watching. I'll be back when I've got part 2 ready for you, and I've made some more progress on Terry's Enterprise D. So thanks for watching. You got any questions, let me know. I'll try and answer them as best I can. If not, I'll see you in the next one.